Okay, everyone, thank you for joining us today. And so if you're not going to be speaking right now, let's have you mute so we don't have anything kind of switching around uncomfortably. So I'm going to do a quick little introduction as to why we're doing this. So I'm also going to start with, I'm actually going to get to why we're doing this, but I want to give you permission to ask awkward questions. We're asking the panel for the freedom to learn without the pressure of getting it right at this time of learning. The only questions that are off limits are questions that are intended to be disrespectful or antagonistic. We're asking our panelists to be patient with poor wording and the learning journey. So thank you so much for being here today. We want you to be true to who you are, and we know you want to be able to honor the patient's faith. We've invited the members of the panel here today to help us learn how we can show up for people. What can we avoid if we're trying to be supportive? How do we answer the questions that we might have been afraid to ask? Please remember that these 5 people are representing 5 perspectives. Within any tradition, you'll find people who have different interpretations and perspectives. So please don't head into a mindset of, but I heard something different from someone else, at least in an argumentative fashion. If you're asking a sincere question, that's obviously completely okay. So I'll start with introducing some of our panelists. So Evie, who you've been seeing on the screen talking to me, she is one of our volunteers, and she has been co-coordinating this with me. She is on the leadership team of Boulder, Colorado, and please help me with the pronunciation here, Evie. Is it Chevra Kadisha?
Well, you could say chevra, but we
Chevra?
we we accept anything.
Okay, Chevra
Chevra,
Kadisha.
it's a practice. Yeah, chevra
Got it.
kadisha.
She's been with them for over 15 years and coordinates okay, we're going into the pronunciation again, Shmira and Tahara.
Perfect.
Okay,
Yes.
I'm good enough. Thank you. For
Although
the,
some
what was
people
that?
might say tahara, some people say anyway. It anything you translate trying to say in English, it's okay.
Okay, as long as we're being respectful.
Yeah.
So she helps organize that for the funeral homes in the area for all Jewish deaths, whether they are affiliated with the synagogue or not, which is very consistent with True's approach. It is a calling for her to help others with these end-of-life traditions and issues. We also have Brother Noor, who is an energetic and active community funeral director. He is the owner of MFS Funeral Services and is the head coordinator of, pronunciation again, Janazah Project. How did I do?
You did well enough.
Well enough. Thank you for your patience with me. Which currently services the greater tri-state area. And the reason that doesn't sound familiar is because he's calling us from New York today. So we really appreciate him being willing to join us when we're not even in his direct region, while providing affordable services to those who have and free services for those who need them in New York, New Jersey, and Pennsylvania. Brother Noor has gained traction from within and outside the Muslim community, leading him to a broader platform of funeral services, help, and collaboration with the general population. We also have an additional volunteer of ours. I don't know why my nose is so itchy, excuse me. Rick Merrill is with us, and he has an extensive background, including as a dancer, choreographer, and teacher, meditation instructor, and Tai Chi practitioner for more than 4 decades. He leads meditation and movement workshops with people of all ages and backgrounds to encourage us all to rediscover and nurture our vital qualities of embodied wisdom, compassion, and creativity. He's a Buddhist chaplain certified with the Upaya Zen Center and the Shambhala Buddhist community. Rick aspires to offer his work to other chaplains, social workers, first responders, and teachers, people working and living in challenging and stressful circumstances as supportive resources for healing, rejuvenation, and building resilience. We have Tiffany Thorn, who is one of our chaplains. Tiffany joined the True Spiritual Care team in June of 2024, so she is also a new kid, just like me. She was drawn to chaplaincy during her many years of serving as a hospice volunteer in Ohio. She completed 4 units of, and was it chaplain pastoral education? I think that was what it was.
It's clinical pastoral education.
That's what it was, clinical
Yeah.
pastoral education, and earned her divinity and master's from Chicago Theological Seminary in 2022. So thank you, everyone. And I'm not sure if Susan, oh, good, Susan is here. Susan, I'm going to make you a co-host so that if you have any reason that you want to share something on your screen, that you have that functionality. And I'm sorry I don't have the introduction for you. So do you mind taking a moment to share your vast and impressive background with us?
Thank you. Thank you. Welcome, people. I'm happy to be a part of this panel and this conversation. It's very important in the work that we do. I was ordained in the United Methodist Church many years ago, and I served as a pastor in the Methodist Church in Ohio, and then moved into chaplaincy 27 years ago, and I worked in St. Louis, and then I've been here with True for over 14 years. I'm currently semi-retired, but still working some, which is great, but have met just hundreds of people through their journeys in this very important interfaith practice.
Thank you. And I didn't really give the other panelists who are here a moment to talk. So let's go ahead back up to the top to Evie. And if you had anything else you felt like adding before we start heading into the rest of the body of what we're working on today.
That's okay. I guess I could add, I'm also represent an organization that's pretty new called JADE, which stands for Jewish Association for Death Education. And we have a very good application software tool to answer a lot of questions, but I'll make sure.
Yeah, actually do mention that website real quick, because that is a good resource.
Yeah, I can even put it in here.
In the chat, that'd be great.
Yeah. And that's it.
All right. And so then let's move on to Brother Noor. And I believe that he also has a similar type of website that's informative. So please take it away.
Hey guys, Brother Noor with the Janazah Project. Been doing funeral services for about 15 years. I'm just here to answer any and all questions, and like was earlier introduced, no question is a bad question, and no question is an off-limit question. You guys are welcome to ask any and all questions. Here in New York, New Jersey, and PA, we actually work very tightly, not only with our Jewish community members, brothers and sisters, because we have pretty much the same funeral and burial rites, but also with those who just are looking for super simple green burials, because that's what Muslim funeral services are, super simple green burials. So anything that's in that field of how to handle Muslims on terms of like a religious/cultural question that you may have, or also just something how to cut costs and how to keep things super simple and straight to the point. Hopefully I'll be able to assist you guys with that.
That's a terrific resource. Thank you. Rick, would you like to go next?
Yes, thank you. And hello, everyone. I'm very pleased to be here and share this time with you. And as Brother Noor said, I'm open to engage in any questions that you may have. And there are no bad questions or inappropriate questions. To be slightly clumsy and awkward and open, I think is an asset for all of us.
Thank you. Tiffany, would you like to go next?
I can't tell if I'm muted or not. No, you can
No,
hear
I
me.
can hear you.
Well, no, I just wanted to thank you volunteers, everybody, for being here, and Lauren for like really putting together an interfaith panel and representing the Jewish and Muslim and Buddhist traditions, because as chaplains, like that's really what we're committed to, is honoring our patients' faith, and it really like our own faith kind of takes the back seat to the people that we serve. So thank you.
Thank you. And I guess I don't need to put Susan on the spot twice because she gave her introduction. So let's go ahead and start looking at the questions that we got. So I asked our volunteers for questions, and within our volunteer department, we also thought of a few. So the first one that I have on here is there a certain point of view that we should be aware of? And then kind of, each of you can offer from your own spiritual tradition, and perhaps the chaplains could offer a general response as well as potentially a Christian response as we approach a patient of that tradition. So again, is there a certain point of view that we should be aware of as we approach a patient of that tradition. So should we go a little bit popcorn style? We'll adjust as we go if we figure out that something flows a little bit better.
And let people know they can look at the speaker if they just change their view on their screen.
Good point. Yeah, so if you're seeing everybody, that can be a little bit overwhelming. And so then I believe it is in the upper right-hand corner along the top black bar. If you wanted to change your view, and it is literally called speaker view. So if you click on that, then you'll be focused on the speaker. Thanks, Wendy. Okay, well, let's go ahead and do it in a similar order as before. Oh, who's starting to talk?
I did.
Great.
Good at being popcorn. Point of view. I think one of the things that needs to be understood is that Jews like to be, the tradition is to be buried as quickly as possible. So trying to get the doctor to sign the death certificate. And the other thing is trying to encourage people to do some pre-planning would be good. And I think everybody probably agrees on that one. And as we go along, more of the differences will probably come up in the questions, but just on a very brief thing, in the Jewish tradition, we use a very plain pine box with no metal. And so you don't really have to sit around and pick a casket. You shouldn't have to. And again, everybody has different opinions, but the tradition would be, and we dress everybody alike in a very simple white outfit called a shroud, or there's a Hebrew word for it that you don't really need to know about. But we try to say the dead is respected as much as the living, and everybody should be treated alike. So that's one reason that everybody should be dressed a lot and not have to pick out the outfit. And we want the body to be decomposing as fast as possible instead of being saved. So I don't want to take up too much time. It's easy for me to do that. So
I believe that Islamic tradition might have some overlap there. And do you like going, should I continue with Brother Noor or just Noor? Which would you prefer?
They're both
They're equal?
perfectly fine.
Okay.
So regarding Evie is representing the Jewish practices, and the Muslim practices are extremely similar. We have the same concept of expediting the funeral, which means expediting everything that you need on a legal aspect to get the deceased ready for release out, and then those who will take care of the Muslim patient to then be washed and shrouded, prayed over, and then buried in the most simplest and quickest fashion. But again, should we gear our questions more for the medical professionals, or more for those who are in the end of care kind of doulas? Where should I go with this question?
That's a really great question. So the volunteers in our department are primarily doing shifts where it's more like companionship. So it's kind of accompanying people during the struggle. And so though we have a full department of chaplains, there are times that our volunteers have felt like they don't know how to address the concerns or the emotions and the spiritual aspects of the patients that they're helping. And so it's less clinical and more just trying to have an understanding so that they can, go in with a respectful awareness.
Okay, so with that being said, thank you for the clarification. I would say, obviously, this is no disregard to anybody, because as human beings, anybody who's in this field, hopefully more so than not, are in it entirely for compassion. Of course, we need to kind of have our bills paid, but for the most part, we could have had our bills paid probably with something else that doesn't require so much time, emotion, and other sacrifices. But hopefully, it's a symbol of our sincerity towards helping our fellow man, brother or sister. With that being said, I would say that there's nothing better than having someone of the faith who's learned to actually be able to speak with them. This is the first line of support, I would say. Now, at the same time, having someone who's of any other faith come in, just bringing them Number one, as we know, the power of support, of presence, just being there and reminding them to be positive. It's a huge thing in Islam to assume good of our Creator, of our Maker, that we are going, we came from and we are returning to the most merciful and the most loving. And just reminding them of that will dispel a lot of the, as we call it, waswasa, which is like the whispers and the thoughts and the OCD and the overthinking. Just reminding them that they came from the most merciful and that they're returning to the most merciful. And I'm saying this while trying to be conscious of the fact that, those who might speak with these Muslim patients may not be of a Muslim faith, so they wouldn't want to feel hypocritical towards their own to their own faith or on their own ideology. So just saying certain things which are just universal about being positive and knowing that our Lord and Creator is the most merciful and the most generous. And as much as we love them and that we would love to give them and to do for them, God, on the other hand, can do all of that. So to just assume good of their Maker. We believe that the process of passing is entirely connected to the soul. So it's a soul journey. And so there are certain things which I will share on the meeting chat, certain things that you can actually play, even on YouTube. You can play for the patient. And we believe that it's a cause of tranquility for the soul. So I have no problem with sharing some of those things. And then finally, for the volunteers, again, volunteers. So just the positivity, playing something for them that would kind of be to their, nourishing and helping, supporting their soul. And then finally, trying to accommodate as much as you can, because in the Islamic tradition, family and friends coming to visit at the time of passing is such a huge thing that just try to find out a way to accommodate. Some hospitals and hospice cares and facilities might not be able to accommodate too many people at one given time. Be conscious of that, while at the same time being conscious that everyone would love to say a few words. So even if it's a 5-minute visit, what have you, it's a whole lot better than telling, a large group of people, sorry, we can't accommodate you.
That's great advice. Also, any links or advice you might have on things that volunteers could play, I would love it if you would email that to me, because we can make that available to all of our volunteers through the portal that they use. So that would be a lovely resource to make available.
We'll do, no problem.
Yeah, terrific. Rick, would you like to talk about something that you feel that you want to make sure people are aware of when approaching a Buddhist patient?
Well, I would just like to, I resonate much with what Brother Noor has shared. I think probably in all our traditions, coming alongside the person with a sense of authentic presence and respect and encouraging a sense of dignity, that this is a very, very profound moment, and encouraging also the person to feel their inherent basic goodness, that this is a moment for them to appreciate themselves, their lives, that they've been loved and they are loved, and maybe and to be aware of course of the fear that someone might have at this moment, and to help them understand that this is a natural process, that it's a very as I say, a process with great dignity, and a moment of transition and not an end. And this quality, I can't emphasize enough, this quality of presence, of being alongside of this person and embodying equanimity and compassion and openness, that it's not like as chaplains that we have any particular answers, but rather that we are accompanying this person in their journey and whatever arises for them. It depends how kind of devout the person might be. If they're a Buddhist, traditionally, a Buddhist person, as they pass, might request a period of 3 days where the body is not touched, where the body is placed in a circumstance where they can be accompanied by family members, chaplains, other Buddhist practitioners, where we can practice with the body, because the thought is that this is a transition, and as the person's consciousness is leaving this physical body, there's the potential for confusion and fear and attachment to the body, attachment to familiar reference points. So it's very powerful to be able to sit with that person as they're losing these reference points and encourage them to go forth, that they need not hold on, they need not be afraid, that this journey is a good one, and to not turn back, but to move forward into the next phase of their journey. So a Buddhist views these first 3 days as really powerful and important, that they're supported in this way.
Yeah, I think we're seeing a lot of really beautiful practices. Evie is saying that there is something that she forgot to include. So let's check on that before we move on. Thank you, Rick. Okay, we might have technical difficulties or something else. Tiffany.
Oh, I didn't. I hadn't
sorry.
muted.
Oh, got it.
When Noor spoke, it reminded me that that's some of our similarities, and when Rick spoke, it reminded me of other similarities. It is important to know that in the Jewish tradition that we do also believe in soul, and the soul is separate from the body. And there's such a range of different observances among the Jews, and some haven't studied a lot, and some have studied more. And we do the actual basic thought is there is an afterlife. In fact, there's a phrase called the world to come, and now I'm freezing on the word in Hebrew, but I was surprised to find out some Jewish people did not know we believe in angels and that we believe that the soul goes on. And of course, all my hospice work helped me be convinced that there was a spirit world, but it is in the Jewish tradition. And the reason we do the Shmirah, the sitting with the body, similar to how Buddhists do it, is the same thing. We believe the soul might be confused and the soul might need a little companionship to transition smoothly and peacefully. So I am always intrigued at how many overlaps there are.
It's really fascinating, isn't it?
Yeah.
Okay, Tiffany, as you're dealing with, since you're kind of a little bit more like pan religious representative, with your experiences, what kinds of things would you like the volunteers to be aware of, when it comes to the spiritual, experience of our patients?
I guess just kind of a point of view of compassionate curiosity, like that we are not the authority on anyone's faith. Gosh, so many things to say, and I feel like I'm frozen. I feel like as a chaplain, it is my highest honor to connect people to like a faith leader in their own tradition, and also to explore with them and be curious about what their beliefs are and what their like I believe that God is relational. If a patient does believe in God, relational. So what is your relationship with God? And it could be none at all. It could be God loves me and doesn't want me to suffer. And to honor all those things are what I'm supposed to do.
I like that. Thank you. Susan, what would you like to contribute to this question?
Well, it's a very big question, and um, lots of different ways to try to address the question. First of all, I want to say that to the volunteers that we're grateful for you and for what you contribute. And yes, it's very important for you to approach people with respect for their dignity, for what they believe, what they don't believe, for their end of life journey. And I think one thing that's critically important is that just because a person may claim that they are a particular religion, the, that doesn't mean that they are following particular belief systems and that they want to have things done a particular way. So it's always important when people are among the living and with family members. So if you ask them what's their religion, or if you see on the board at the care center that they're Catholic, you want to walk in without making assumptions. Because there are Catholics that are devout, which means they watch Mass on a daily basis, they attend Mass on a weekly basis, maybe daily. And then there's other people who they were brought up in going to Catholic school, and that's as far as it went. And everything in between. And just because a person says they're a particular religion doesn't mean that they believe it. Oftentimes, as people, and this is a part of our counseling role as chaplains, is to see if people are struggling with what they believe, if what they were taught as children, as young people, as adults, works for them, and to try to give them space to explore what speaks to them now. The other thing that I will add, and I realize I just have talked about Catholicism here and not other Christian faiths. I mean, again, it's a very, very big question. I also want to respect that we meet lots of people that are not religious, and they may be secular oriented. They may consider themselves humanists. They maybe have never had any kind of formal or informal kind of religious leanings at all in their lives, or they maybe have had some tradition that's been a part of their background, but they've left that. So again, I think one of the very important things is to not make assumptions and to approach people with the questions and the curiosity, as Tiffany said, and the dignity, and then see what's important to them now, and how we can best support them as they are going through their end of life process.
Thank you. Hey, Lauren, I have several questions of curiosity.
Terrific.
Many people are interested in knowing about the end of life, what's afterlife, if the belief is that there is an afterlife. Another question, Stephanie's of Catholic chaplain coming in on Sunday to pray with their patients, and they are offered to the Catholics. Should they be offered to everybody? Another one is Claudia's asking about her experience in the past with a Buddhist death. The family wanted a window open and the body allowed to remain undisturbed in the home as long as possible, which I think we discussed that. Is that permitted with True? I don't believe the windows at the care center open. I may be wrong on that.
But since most of our patients are in their own home, we're at a facility.
And then, is dry ice required?
I would say the details of that actually are outside of the scope of our ability to make decisions on it. And a lot of that is going to have to do with laws, because there are significant regulations with green funerals becoming something
Much
people
more.
are more aware of. There is some shift, but it isn't necessarily something we have decision-making power over. One of the questions that I was also seeing, I think someone was just trying to talk.
Yeah, Laura, it's Laura Miller.
Hi,
Hey,
Laura.
everybody. I'm one of the chaplains of the True Team as well. And I just wanted to address that last question. I actually have a patient on service now who is Buddhist, who will be doing the 3-day practice after her death. And they are working with the funeral home to ensure that the body remains, I guess, however Colorado law says. So I think that it's a dispensation. I also have worked with an Islamic family where in a different state where there's a 2-day hold on the body. And we worked with the state to have their dispensation and their wishes and according to their faith and tradition to be expedited.
Oh,
So
that's
there is
great.
wiggle room. And it's just in the spirit of collaboration with like funeral homes and with the state regulators. So I can answer that question to there. We do play a role in that.
Yeah.
So at the care center, we would have a patient stay for 3 days possibly if that was their request.
You know, I don't know about the care center.
Oh, we've done that.
Wendy.
We've done that.
I mean, Susan's been around a lot longer than me, but I just wanted to jump in there.
Thank you.
Question. I'm sorry, I'm not on your panel, but
No, I appreciate
Laura,
you
that's
being here.
great. If I can just add, at our
Please.
care center, we definitely have had people that have been able to stay for that 3-day period of time. It's something that, you know, has to be brought up with the staff because it's
There have to be
using a
conversations.
bed. But that's a part of what True is, that's important to True is that we respect those kinds of needs and wishes. Now, Longmont United Hospital will not allow there to be a window opened. So that is a barrier, but we do try to, as an organization, to help with whatever people's needs may be.
Thank you.
And maybe I could add something to this question. I think it depends on state laws, and I've experienced this differently in different states. But in one case, we were allowed to put the body on dry ice for 3 days and practice with him, and also it depends on the funeral home. Some funeral homes are familiar with this process and very accommodating, and will come pick the body up after 3 days. In fact, with my mother, that was the case. We found a funeral home that was willing to hold her in a refrigerated room for 3 days, and we came every day, and they brought her out, and we were able to practice with her. But as they say, it depends on the state, and also finding a funeral home that offers cremation in a Buddhist case, cremation services. And if I could very briefly support the comments of the last two speakers, I also agree that it's so important as chaplains and hospice workers to practice the discipline of coming without assumptions. Especially, we're caregivers. We aspire to offer support and care, but there's a very thin line where we need to realize that we don't have our role is not to have answers. Our role is to listen and respect. And that can be edgy because it puts us also in a very insecure moment, but that's exactly where we need to be, Then
that vulnerability is how we can connect.
Absolutely. That vulnerability, you said it perfectly, is how we connect with this very real moment. And I think that is felt, that is transmitted more powerfully than words, that the person feels, this person is with me. They feel where I'm at, and they respect me, and they're not trying to tell me what to do or what to think or how to feel. And my experience is that is so powerful. I just briefly will share that in the Zen tradition, the Zen Buddhist tradition, there are what are called the 3 tenets. And they are not knowing, bearing witness, and appropriate or compassionate action. And the not knowing part is what these previous speakers were talking about, is that being willing to be vulnerable on the spot with total presence and not bring assumptions, not bring your expertise, not bring like, oh, I've got to fix this, and be totally open to appreciate the wisdom and mystery of what's happening. And of course, that's the bearing witness, to stay with that. And then the offering appropriate action or compassion action is, well, what comes up? What comes up that feels appropriate? It may be just being present and being silent, or it may be offering a word or a gesture, or as some of the others have said, playing some music or offering a scripture. But that comes from the willingness to be open and without assumptions, without this need to fix, and which is very human. We want to do that, but we have to check that and be aware when that overtakes the openness and the sacred quality of this moment.
I think that's a really common struggle that volunteers in this area experience, is that desire to remove all suffering from the patient. And it's simply not something that we have the power to do. And so respecting someone's journey, doing what we can, without entanglement, but also respecting that their journey is theirs to have, and not trying to interfere with that. So, and let's see, there were two other questions that Wendy mentioned. One of them was about Catholic communion. I know Catholics can feel quite strongly that if you haven't gone through the proper channels, that you are not eligible for their communion, but perhaps other traditions will feel differently.
Yeah. It's hard to say on that
Yeah.
one. You don't want to exclude anybody.
Was the question communion? I thought the question was about prayer.
We have a Catholic chaplain who comes in on Sunday to pray with our patients. We offer him to the Catholics. Should we offer him to everyone?
Okay. So prayer is something that anybody, although it's also, prayer is also what's the word I'm looking for? It's also a danger zone too. But in terms of, if a Catholic priest were to come in and if they were going around to give people communion, or if they were there to anoint people, that would be only for Catholic people. If there is a person that is Catholic that is going to rooms to offer prayer, I think that's the kind of thing that theoretically could be asked of each person, regardless of what their religious background is. And probably some would say they want it and some would say they don't. But I don't think there's really a right or wrong answer to that. It's a little complicated.
Yeah. So no simple answer.
Mm-hmm.
The offer is the key.
Yeah.
Right.
Offering is good. I want to mention something quickly that Brother Noor has mentioned in the comments, and people might not be aware that the word Allah is literally just God. And so people will typically associate that with Islam, but it is really no different than saying the word God. So, please be respectful and aware of that. And then I think there was an additional question, Wendy. What was that one?
We covered it. It had to do
did.
with the open window and.
Oh, yes. Okay, so let's get back to the list. And I feel like this one's actually a pretty simple one. How to respond if a patient asks me what I believe? Should it be a question I skirt or respond truthfully to? I'm going to answer this from volunteer services perspective. When we get a request in, if there's a patient who feels really strongly, then we will include that, if they prefer a Catholic or whatever the case may be, then we will include that in the posting. And so if that isn't something that anyone has become aware of, then from our standpoint, that you're permitted to respectfully answer any questions within your own comfort zone. And I'm curious if anyone, we do have quite a few questions to get to, so I don't want to spend too much time on this one, but does anyone have anything that they want to add to that?
I would add that I think we need to be careful, any of us, whenever anybody asks us what we believe. And I think it's best to try to turn the question back to them.
That's
to
great
say,
advice.
what do you have in mind, and what are you thinking about? What is your curiosity? And this is, again, where I think the role as volunteer is different from the professional spiritual counselor too.
Mm-hmm.
Exactly.
Yeah, because we really do want it to be about the patient and not to start making it about us or the volunteer. And Brother Noor had something to contribute.
Oh,
I wonder if you're not
Yes.
muted or if you're muted.
I feel like
Thank
you
you.
just,
Thank you.
okay.
So regarding this is the point previous point about having someone of a different faith, whether it be for prayer, I would say that, as I mentioned, one of my first points is that the best thing to offer, at least a Muslim patient, would be an imam who is well versed, because they would be able to connect on that level. It does not mean that a priest or a rabbi or anybody who is of a religious ordinance of a high place in terms of their religious capacity can't connect with them. As I mentioned before, just the overall general fact that in all scriptures, God is the most compassionate, God is the most loving, God is the most forgiving. So just providing these types of morale or spiritual boosting points, along with this conviction that their Lord is across all scriptures, loving, compassionate, forgiving, merciful. These are the things that I would recommend the volunteers kind of always have ready on the table. And then from there, they can go into seeing if there's an imam who's available, even if it's not in person, but by phone, to answer questions. And then the concept of being asked the question, well, what do you believe in? You're right. It is the patient's, time, and we should be focusing on the patient. But sometimes, as discussed before, a patient might feel that, this moment of their life is just a different calling. They might feel that they're more in tune with their spiritual nature, and they're literally brainstorming. And prior to this, they've probably just been so engulfed in the world with all the worldly materials and distractions. So I think there's a fine line between telling them, well, what do you believe, and what do you think, which is nice because you're giving them the platform and the mic, but they might literally be in a very inquisitive type of spiritual journey, search, and so letting them know what you believe might not be the worst thing to do if you can just keep it short, because we also get called in to visit different people just to provide support. I am a chaplain with the United States Chaplaincy Task Force, also with the New York State Chaplaincy Task Force, and we put religion to the side when we see our brother and sister in humanity just, in a really difficult situation, condition, and we give them that presence of support, that supportive presence. And point being, I don't think there's any one fit answer for any one of these situations. They're all case by case. And I think we really need to be in tune with the patient, with what's going on with them. Provide them all the resources, let them know that everything's available. If you want a priest, a pastor, a rabbi, it's all there. If you want to talk to me, it's fine. At the same time, respecting any, legalities that certain services might have, certain lines for.
I feel like that kind of almost completely answers another question that we have, that this has been getting addressed kind of indirectly. And this question is, what do you say to people who are dying and they are afraid? And I feel like a lot of what Brother Noor has just been saying about, the really reassuring thoughts about, the merciful nature of Allah or God, depending on your tradition. I feel like that is probably a really great place to start. And I'm going to step aside for the people who know more than me to contribute to that. Tiffany, would you like to jump in?
Yeah, I think at that point, I have explored with a patient who was considering using medical assistance in dying. She said, I'm scared. I'm afraid God's going to be angry. And I asked her, tell me about your relationship with God. And she talked herself, back into reassurance. She said, I believe God loves me and doesn't want me to suffer. So there she was afraid and she settled herself. I think
What a
anything that
powerful
we can,
question.
right, anything that we can come up with, like a there, don't be afraid,
Yeah.
is less powerful, of course, than something our patient finds within themselves.
Yeah, that's such a good point. I really love that. Thank you. And you actually kind of alluded to something else that somebody was asking, and it's a little bit long the way they asked it, but I'm not sure how to distill it. So I'll just go ahead and say it. And she says, years ago, when my husband and I were drawing up our end of life wishes, an attorney told us about the Terry Schiavo story, and it led them to conversations about medical aid in dying. So they have questions about the idea of not wanting to play God. And so they are curious about what the representatives we have here from different traditions feel about whether using MAID is doing that. Yeah, and we don't want to get too deeply philosophical because we could definitely spend a whole day just on that question or more. But if anyone has any thoughts on that, because I know that can be a real struggle for people who are considering medical aid in dying, is if there are going to be afterlife repercussions.
That's a really big question, and I think would really be best explored somewhat separately, because there are a lot of opinions about that.
Yeah.
And people can receive guidance from their religious leader or spiritual guide, whatever, that may be helpful, and sometimes it's devastating to them.
Mm-hmm.
Yeah.
I think this is one of those things where if you took 10 people of the same tradition and put them in a room and asked them their opinion, you'd get 10 opinions.
Right.
And so perhaps Tiffany's approach to asking that person to kind of explore their own relationship to God, their own relationship to their beliefs, could help them get the clarity that they need. So yeah, that's a really complicated one, isn't it?
I want to thank you for that question, by the way, because I like what you said, Lauren, that 10 people of the same religion might give you 10 answers. It really makes me want to explore more from different experts, scholars within my faith.
Yeah, it would be interesting, wouldn't it? And Brother Noor had something he was preparing to say.
Yes, that we're meeting our brothers and sisters in humanity at a very critical time. We don't know, with all of the ups and downs that we have in our own lives, at that moment, and we've seen it, time and time again, year after year, it is the most, for some, the most complicated time is that time. And so I think, again, going back to general words or methods of support will actually help. And I think Tiffany was spot on about, yes, turning it back to them, but allowing them to kind of go into it. Now, if a person can't go into it, that's where you need some type of spiritual guide of just a reminder or a conversation or just sharing their opinion. But there's one verse that I wanted to just mention that I think kind of allows a person to put on their boots, if you may. And that is that God does not burden a soul with more than it can bear. Now, a person may say, well, you have no idea what I'm going through. And then the response to that would be, you're absolutely right. I can't put myself in your shoes, but I do know that if you were to give me some of your life story, you would walk me through all these different mountains and ups and downs that you probably had it, you know, in very difficult times and ways, and you were able to overcome that. So this is no different. You shouldn't look at this moment in time as something where you can't overcome this. Passing and returning, right, or transitioning is not something that is to be overcome in a sense that you're going to beat it. You're not going to beat it. It's part of the transition. It's part of your life. It's more about accepting the transition. And again, it depends on who you're speaking to, what level they are in, sometimes even the exposure, the experience, the wisdom, and all these different things that are, kind of calculated into this. But allowing that person, now as Tiffany was mentioned, to speak and maybe helping them, steering them in that, I'm sure if you gave me some of your life stories, you'd be able to talk me through all these ups and downs and mountains that you have been through. So maybe just letting that person kind of relive their lives that they've, maybe encountered so much and conquered so much and came through, and went through so much, let's just say. And of course, everybody's in a different mindset, and we have to be mindful that some people are very, very in a very sensitive condition and situation. But for those who are engaging and they're talking, letting them know that they've already conquered so much, and this transition needs to be one of acceptance versus one of like defeat. Like you're not defeated if you pass, and there's no way that you're going to defeat passing, right? So it's not
You're not
quite
getting out of this alive.
maybe not the best thing to tell them, right? But yeah, you got
Maybe
it.
don't quote me. Don't quote me with the patients. Rick, I think that you had something you wanted to contribute here.
Well, I just wanted to say how what Brother Moore and Tiffany and I'm sorry, I forgot the name of the person who spoke before that, are just so right on. Because I think it's so important to acknowledge that in this transitional moment, fear and doubt are the bearers of great wisdom. If someone doesn't have fear and doubt in this moment, there's something that's too locked down. And as Brother Moore said, to help the person explore and unpack the fear, talk about this. What is it? I've experienced this in my hospice work, that helping the person explore this fear helped her to actually find great confidence in her capacity to meet challenges in her life. And that this is just another challenge. It's a big one, but she's faced challenges and challenges alone by herself with courage and openness and sense of humor, and through not telling her what to do or what to think, but just supporting her in unpacking, and with curiosity and respect, she was able to finally tell me how to do it. And that was so powerful and so heartwarming. And also, it as has been said, that it puts us on the same level. We're not there as experts. We're there to help accompany the other person to bring forth their own wisdom. And yeah, that's what I would like to add.
Thank you. I'm seeing something in the comments that I feel is worth saying out loud, and it says, don't make the mistake that all spiritual questions are under a religious doctrine. Goodness, love, and oneness are portals to transition. And so I think it's also important to recognize that not everyone is affiliated with a specific tradition. Not everyone feels that they're religious. Feeling that you're spiritual is a very, very common sentiment. And so we want to be respectful to all of our patients. Here's another question that we got from a volunteer, and I'm curious if you do or say something specific to those who don't specify a religious belief, and this person is thinking of people in our care center who are usually there for 2 to 3 days before death. Just so Brother Noor understands, most of our patients are either in their home or they're in a place like an assisted living facility, but we do have several beds that are in a wing of a hospital, and usually people go there when their symptoms are unmanageable outside of that setting. So most people do have the luxury of being in a warmer, more friendly environment, but we do have people who are in the care center and they're usually there for a short time. So if you're trying to show up in a way that you feel is kind of spiritually respectful in an environment like the care center, what does that look like in your opinion? So we've got Rick on here right now. I can see you on the screen. So why don't we start with you?
I'm sorry, could you just in a compact way repeat the question?
So essentially the question is, if you're, and I think we could apply this to any patient who's potentially non-responsive or nonverbal, without knowing more about their spiritual background, how do you recommend that volunteers show up? In a lot of ways, I would say this is probably more a job for our chaplains to be showing up in this way for that population. But is there anything that you can think of that could be a respectful way to show up for people who you're unaware of their own traditions?
Well, just to emphasize again, this coming with a sense of openness, curiosity, respect, not bringing your backpack of responses, and that vulnerability, it translates, it communicates, and I found actually that it's an embodied quality. It communicates from body to body. And I remember with a particular person, at a certain point, she said to me, Rick, you're really good at the silences. And this was a transitional moment because she was intellectually brilliant and kind of tough and assured me I'm an atheist. I don't believe in any of this crap. And but just being willing to be there, vulnerable, open, without any goal, it softened her to a point where she was able to admit, Rick, I'm actually afraid of the unknown. And this is where I was able to help her to kind of feel that, hey, you in the past, you faced these very difficult circumstances, and on your own, you navigated through them. And she said to me, I mean, in her case, she had been piloting sailboats on her own solo. And she said, yeah, but damn it, I had charts and computers and navigation and da-da. And I said, well, yeah, but maybe in this case, you're going to have to just trust the sea and the wind and your heart without computers.
I love that answer. Oh, and in the comments, Janet shared, I'm sorry to cut you off. Janet shared presence. Presence was her one word reply to my question here. What did I cut you off while you were trying to say there, Rick?
Well, I could see in her face, her body, just her shoulders lowered. And she deeply, she said, I guess, damn it, I can do that. And it was,
yeah,
she was coming into her own power.
Yeah.
And it is presence.
I'm jumping into that because it reminds me of something that somebody had told me a few years ago, to be comfortable with uncertainty. And somehow that's, no matter what we all think about an afterlife, the world to come, or what happens when you die, no one can tell us. So that is quite a challenge in being comfortable with uncertainty. And just using the words to me was calming to me. It could be about any part of your life. And by the way, I was thinking of answers to what somebody put in the chat about poems, music, reading, scripture.
Yeah. If the panelists can think of any recommendations, like I offered to Brother Noor, I would love for people to send me those, because then we can make them available to our entire volunteer community and not only people who are present today. So, but also Rick's answer reminded me of a book that I don't know if anyone here has read. It's by Dr. Jill Bolte Taylor. And she was a Harvard neuroscientist who studied strokes. One day she was in the shower. She realized she was having exactly the kind of stroke that she'd been studying, but she didn't get help until it had done quite a bit of damage. And for me, her takeaway from that, because she was nonverbal for quite a while during her recovery, and she couldn't recognize her mom. She had no language ability to use it or understand it. And she could tell who was genuinely there to help her and who was just there doing their job. And I feel like that's really, that it's boiled down in that word presence, because if you're really authentically there and connecting with another person, just like Rick was saying, people can feel that. And so rather than thinking of it exclusively from a religious standpoint or a spiritual standpoint, being genuinely and respectfully there with the other person, being completely present with that person is probably one of the most powerful things you can do. And now that I've said that, what would our experts like to say? or contradict me if the case may be. Oh, that was Stroke of Insight, Dr. Jill Bolte Taylor. I also made a note to myself to include it with any links and other things that we send out for this. So I think it's
And
a really
actually,
good book.
there's just adding, there's an American Buddhist nun wrote a book called Comfortable with Uncertainty, which is very helpful resource.
Yeah, good stuff. So let's look at the next question here. Try and get to the right screen. I feel like we have kind of addressed this in terms of the way some traditions kind of feel about, sitting with the body and things like that. But I feel like I want to approach this question from the perspective of being respectful when the traditions are quite a bit different from what you're accustomed to. So this question was, I've heard that some traditions will be quite loud and emotional in their processing of grief, and that in other traditions, it's best to be calm and quiet. Can you tell me about that? And I think my question in that is really going to be more, if there is a process that is unfamiliar or surprising to you, how would our panelists recommend that a volunteer handle it? Because perhaps they're experiencing something that is completely new to them. And sometimes traditions that are unfamiliar can seem, even a little bit scary. So what recommendations do you have?
I wanted to quickly, if I may, Lauren, just the past point, two things. One of them, I'll take your, I'll ask you I'll ask you to be excused as I kind of like turned it into a bit of a joke, but just imagine, as our females, our wives, and mothers going through labor, it's the most painful experience that, a woman or even a man can, just go through. Any human being is the time of labor. Now imagine being in support of someone who's going through a time like that, how sensitive you would have to be to show them support, but at the same time not cross the line of bothering them to the point where they might lash out on you. So sometimes being present with a genuine amount of presence and being wise with when to give, when to hold back, when to let things go, when to say something is very, very important. So I always remind those who are in these circles that we just need to be mindful that a person is probably going through something far beyond what we can imagine. If the worst of what we can imagine for now, just for paper, is a woman, delivering a baby or what have you, is that you don't want to nag. You don't want to be too quiet. You want to show the type of support and read as much as you can. But then now, when it came to your question of what happens if they're not responsive, what if they're not responding? In that case, I would say just being as genuine as you can, because the concept of energy and the concept of even just the cells of our bodies and molecules of water, they're affected by the things that they hear and the things that they feel in the air. So for sure, presence is all in the chat, but genuine presence of just really being there and reminding them with even more general and basic things, instead of sitting there reminding them of God being merciful and compassionate, all these other things, but just speaking to them shortly and speaking to them quickly about certain things that, if you were to put yourself in their shoes, they have the concept maybe of carrying too much or holding on to too much. So just letting them know that you don't need to hold on to things. You don't need to weigh yourself down. Now's not a time of, overthinking and weighing yourself down. Now's a time of just relaxing, calming down, trusting, being peaceful, being tranquil, those types of things. And I'm sorry that wasn't answering your second question, but it was answering the previous point.
Thank you. Thank you for that. Let's see here.
I want to add that in terms of people walking into a situation that is very different from what they experienced, I think it's very important for our volunteers to be conscious of what their triggers may be, what they are feeling. And if you are feeling discomfort, I think it's important to find a resource to talk about that. And that may be another person on the hospice team. It might be the volunteer coordinator. I would encourage anybody that finds themselves in that moment to start, though, before just like fleeing the room, by just taking some deep breaths, paying attention to what you're feeling, and have some spiritual practice yourself, whatever that may be, to try to help to ground you so that you're not just running away. Yes, there are very, very many different types of expressions of grief that we can witness, and most of the time, if we are patient, we can be with people through whatever it is that they are experiencing.
Yeah, that's true. Opening or approaching with openness and curiosity. But at the same time, I do think that sometimes volunteers in this area can put a lot of pressure on themselves to stick with the patient, even if it's maybe not an ideal fit. For example, if there is anything triggering about the way that that patient practices their faith or the language that they use, keep in mind that you're not going to be able to show up with that openness and curiosity, and it's okay to relinquish that assignment to someone who's a better fit, and not to put that pressure on yourself to show up when it's really not going to be great for you or the patient. Because if there's even just the slightest little bit of edge in how you're feeling about visiting a patient, they can feel it. And so they might not ever be able to put their finger on it, but they can feel it. And I'm sure you've experienced things in your life, so you know what I'm talking about there. I think that might be
and
some
I
things
would
in the
agree
comments.
with that. I just think that it's also important to, in the moment, try to hang in there a little bit, and then to go, talk to your volunteer coordinator. This isn't a good fit, but not to just run and hide just because you're seeing something that you haven't ever experienced before.
Yeah.
But certainly to process it. Yes. Go out of the room and say, oh my gosh, what just happened?
And that brings up another point. Just like they talk when people are being trained in becoming any kind of a therapist, they talk about how it's really important for you to have your own therapist. And I think similarly, if you're going to be showing up with any kind of a spiritual aspect to the way that you're interacting, you need to be making sure you're doing your own, and I'll call it spiritual hygiene. You need to make sure that you're feeling grounded. You need to make sure that you are balanced in your own spiritual practices. Otherwise, trying to kind of interact in that way might not have the kind of impact you're hoping for. So I want to give people permission to kind of step away from that if they don't feel like they're balanced in that area. That actually reminds me of something that Tiffany had shared with me earlier, and I want to read that. And she wants us to talk about the importance of calling in the support of a chaplain, because that's what that team does. So if a volunteer ever believes that they might be in over their head, especially with a patient's spiritual concerns, that they're happy to help while fully honoring the patient and the volunteer and their relationship. So, let's let's keep in mind that we have professionals who are really well trained in this, and we don't have to be doing all of the things.
And if I could briefly offer a support of what Susan was saying, that I think in my experience, it's really essential that we have spiritual practices that support ourselves, that refresh us, that give us resilience. I think there's more and more recognition of clinicians, chaplains, caregivers burning out and reaching a point of moral distress, ethical distress, emotional distress. And it's important to recognize and acknowledge and honor that, and to have practices of our own that, as I say, refresh, resource, and bring us back to our capacities to re-enter with strength and the strength and compassion that's necessary. And if we don't acknowledge that, which is so often the case, I think that people actually feel guilty when they're feeling that kind of stress, like, oh no, I'm a caregiver, I can't acknowledge that I'm feeling this. But as you say, Lauren, it's that also communicates. That is not helpful. So we have to be honest with ourselves and respect ourselves.
I feel like the phrasing that is resonating with me right now is make sure you're nourishing yourself so that you can show up in a nourishing way. So we've got about a little bit more than 10 minutes left. And so I want to give each of our panelists an opportunity. Let's start with Brother Noor, to talk a little bit about anything that maybe we haven't covered that you want to address. And you also had your hand up. So whatever it was that you want to say there, please, I'd like to invite you.
I want to say something which is definitely, let's just say, unconventional, and definitely, what's the term? I'm sure there's going to be a lot of blowback from certain areas, but the reality of the matter, I think when it comes to therapists and counselors, irregardless of a specific religious orientation, irregardless, I believe that if we as a humankind cannot grasp, that the body comprises of two parts, a body and a soul. If the soul is neglected, whether it be neglected due to just not believing that it's there, or neglected in the sense that we believe that it's there, but it doesn't have the same type of precedence or preference or importance as the body, that's where we may be seeing a lot of the dilemmas and the and the situations that we see amassing around the world today. Aside from just the suicide, and aside from the different, let me bring this into a point now instead of kind of just venting. What I want to say is believing in a soul is so important, because the body comprises of these two things. In the same way that we need to nourish our body or else it'll die, we need to nourish the soul, or the soul will die. The soul doesn't die in the sense that we understand it, but the soul can die in many other ways that we can actually see the manifestation of it. And we see it where people just, are heartless and merciless and what have you. And so I think it's really important that irregardless of whatever religion a person professes, a way of life that a person preaches or guides or teaches, you have to nourish the soul. And if you don't nourish the soul, doesn't matter how healthy your physical body is, you can be in chaos. You can be over the edge. You can be done. And so I recommend that everyone, back to the point of being grounded and having that genuine presence, is that you need to know and you need to feel that when we say grounded, we're obviously not speaking about the physical part of the body. There's something that's more grounded, and that, in my opinion, is the soul. So I just want all the volunteers to know that, number one, that genuine nature that's making you sacrifice your life for being in the care of others, this is the greatest testament of you being, a human, and you having a functioning heart, that you care for others. And I'm just kindly reminding and recommending, for myself first and foremost, that we look deeply into our souls and nourish it with all of the organic things that we need to nourish our souls with, right? So, for example, the same way we nourish our bodies with the organic matter of this earth, right? The more pure, the better our bodies will be. I recommend that we nourish our souls with that which comes back from where the soul came from, which is the Creator. And so being grounded with God, in my opinion, regardless of agnostic, this, that, or the third, this is what I believe is going to ultimately help with the patients, because in this time, this is not a matter of marital discord. This is not about business. This is not about getting someone over a small hurdle. This is a transition of their life where their physical body will stay back, and their transition, according to what we believe, their spiritual body will go on. And so I just wanted to say that. And I know that some people might say, hey, that's your religious belief. Don't impose that on me. That's fine. And I'll take that. But if I didn't care for you, I wouldn't say it. I would just stay in the back and just see and seem and deem fit, like, that I'm politically correct. I think it's very important in this phase, in this time in a person's life, those who are professionals, these volunteers who are working, really need to be grounded in their spiritual realm as much as they are in other realms in their life. And I'm very pleased to be and honored to be with this group, because those who are in this field and working this type of work can clearly take their profession or their professional skills elsewhere and probably make a load of money doing other stuff. But we chose this. And so I think that's why we have this connection. And I appreciate everybody for giving me the time to speak and for being here. If I said anything wrong, which is offensive, I ask for your forgiveness. Thank you.
I think that really speaks to the importance of self-care. Thank you so much. I really appreciate that. So which of our panelists would like to go next? What are some parting thoughts you want to make sure that our volunteers are taking away from this?
I can go.
You go, and I'll go next.
Okay. Two things. One, I just want to share with the volunteers what is my guiding light, and it is humility, right? It's okay to show up and not know. Everybody is the expert of their own story, and it's okay to just be with them and not enter with some authority, right? Because we don't have any in their life, in their story. And the second thing, this goes back to our conversation about what if we're asked, what are our beliefs? Just kind of a silly story. I saw a patient in Ohio for a couple years, and we got to be really close, and just a lovely family. And she said to me one day after this couple of years, she goes, my husband and I were talking about you the other night, and we're wondering if you're Jewish. And I'm not. And I felt like yay me, that I didn't pray for her in Jesus' name, or, that I didn't let on what my faith is. I didn't impose any of my stuff on her. And they were wondering, and they came up with a whole different thing. So, and that's okay too.
Thank you so much. Evie.
Oh, I have several thoughts that I keep weaving into what people have just said. One of the things in my work with the Chevra Kadisha, where I get a call from a funeral director who said a Jewish person has died, and they do want the services of the Chevra Kadisha, which are sitting with the body and also having the ritual praying over the washing, praying, and dressing the body. And some people say, well, I want one and not the other. But many people have never heard of it. And we find that some people who are not religious at all their whole life, when it comes to time, and you've probably all noticed it, that some people get more spiritual at the end. They go, oh, wait a minute, is this, where am I going on this new journey? And is there a God? I don't know, maybe. Oh, maybe I better shape up real quick. That kind of thing. But for those, and many of us here are already believers in the soul, because somehow that's why we're connecting at this time of life. So I would say, I think it's healthy, as Noor said, to nourish your soul, and that people recognizing you do have a soul can be healthy. So one of the things I was thinking is, if a Jewish person somehow suddenly gets to feeling, okay, I better pay attention to God, there's so many rabbis in this community, many female rabbis, but I would encourage them to talk to a rabbi at the end to learn what might be a comforting way of doing this transition. And so anyway, I encourage them to speak to a rabbi or a chaplain. We have chaplains. It's just quite amazing how many there are. I'm trying to think, and our Chavrutisha, we have about 100 people in it. We take turns sitting for an hour or two, usually. Some people do the nighttime shift. I wrote down a couple of notes, but yeah, and one of the things we do during our washing, praying, dressing is we do ask the soul person for forgiveness of anything we did that offended. So it's just so interesting to hear everybody talk about the differences and the similarities. We also have a prayer that we encourage people to do if they know they're dying. It's called the Vidui. And there's also this simple 6-word prayer called the Shema, which basically says God is one, that it just to save time and tell you quickly. So we do have a tradition to say something before you die. But I thank you really for this wonderful sharing of all of us. And I'm available if people want to ask me questions later in person, through email, or whatever. I invite anything.
Yeah, with permission, I'll see if each of the
Yes.
panelists is comfortable with sharing their contact info.
Yeah.
Like I think I saw Brother Noor shared his WhatsApp. So yeah, so that's something I can I've been making notes, add to the resources after the event. Thank you, Evie. Susan, would you like to go next?
Well, I just really appreciate this conversation, and again, know that we've just kind of in some ways begun the conversation. It's so important. I think so often we focus on the medical piece, and the spiritual is secondary. I truly believe that the dying process is an interwoven process of the body shutting down and the spirit doing whatever work it needs to do, and whether it's at a conscious level or unconscious level. But for us to be, and I love the word that Rick uses, that we accompany people. So it is their journey, it is their life, their soul. But if we are next to them and we are humble and respecting them, then that is a good thing.
Thank you. And Rick, would you like to give your final comments, what you would like to make sure that our volunteers are aware of? Any final thoughts?
I just want to express my really heartfelt appreciation and support for everyone involved in this kind of work. It's such profound and meaningful work, especially, as Brother Noor said, in these times where there's so much suffering, so much confusion, and so much need. And I think we need to remember to support one another, because we're not alone in this, as we can sometimes feel. And you know, this country, we're all facing a really difficult, challenging moment. So it's reassuring and creating for me a sense of wise hope, and not a naive hope, but a sense of wise, tough hope. So thank you, everyone. I'm really honored to be connected with you.
Thank you so much. I want to thank all of our panelists. Just a little cultural moment. I have a little bit of a history with Thailand, and the word for bow in Thailand literally translates to respect. And so I bow to all of our panelists. I bow to all of our volunteers. And I can't thank you enough for showing up and having the curiosity to share this moment with us. So we will be sharing this so that you can watch the replay. I will track down all of the resources that our panelists will share with us. And if I come up with any others, I'll put those on there too. But thank you so much. Have a good evening.
Good evening. Thank you.
Lauren.